Sign the papers, Elena. Stop being difficult. You don't understand business, and frankly, you're embarrassing me. That was the moment. That was the specific second the blindfold fell off. I looked at my husband, Mark, sitting across the table at the most expensive restaurant in the city. Beside him sat his mother, Patricia, looking at me with that familiar sneer of disgust. They thought they were looking at a naive, starving artist who had just inherited a worthless swamp. They thought they were about to trick me into signing away a fortune for pennies. But what they didn't know was that 3 hours ago, I had a meeting of my own. And the folder in my bag didn't contain the deed they wanted. It contained divorce papers and a finalized sale contract that would leave them with absolutely nothing. Here is how I unmasked the people I thought were my family. For 5 years, I was the charity case in the Thompson family. That's not what they called me to my face, of course. To my face, I was creative or free-spirited. But I knew what they said behind my back. My husband, Mark, was a junior executive at a logistics firm. His mother, Patricia, was old money, or at least she acted like it. They measured worth in titles, luxury cars, and stock portfolios. Me? I was a freelance illustrator. I worked from home, usually in sweatpants, drawing digital assets for indie games and book covers. Because I didn't put on a suit and commute to a glass tower every morning, Mark assumed I made peanuts. He never asked about my finances, and I never volunteered the info. We kept our accounts separate. He paid the mortgage to provide for me, and I paid for all the groceries, utilities, and vacations. He liked feeling like the breadwinner. It stroked his ego. So I let him believe it. I didn't tell him that my little drawings had actually landed me a royalty deal with a major mobile game studio 2 years ago. I didn't tell him I had more in my savings account than he had in his entire retirement fund. I liked living simply. I liked the peace. Until my Uncle Joe passed away. Uncle Joe was the black sheep of my family. He lived off the grid in a tiny cabin about 2 hours outside the city. When he died, he left me everything. Everything turned out to be a rusty pickup truck, a dog named Buster, and 40 acres of boggy, undeveloped marshland that smelled like sulfur and was overrun with mosquitoes. When the executor of the will sent the deed to our house, Mark actually laughed. "Great," he scoffed, tossing the thick envelope onto the kitchen counter. 40 acres of mud. That's just fantastic, Elena. Now we're going to be on the hook for property taxes on a literal swamp. Can we just decline the inheritance? Patricia was over for dinner that night, and naturally, she chimed in. "Oh, darling, just donate it to the state. Or let it go to auction. It's an eyesore. It fits your rustic aesthetic, Elena, but it's a financial liability for Mark." "It was my uncle's home," I said quietly, cutting my steak. "I'm keeping it. I can pay the taxes." Mark rolled his eyes. "With what? Your doodle money? Fine. Just keep my name off the paperwork. I don't want that liability affecting my credit score." So I did. I put the land in my name only. And for 2 months, nobody talked about it. The shift happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Mark came home early, which he never does. He was usually working late, though lately I suspected working late meant drinks with his new assistant, Sarah. But that Tuesday, he came home with flowers. Huge, expensive roses. "I've been thinking," he said, massaging my shoulders as I worked at my desk. "I was too harsh about your uncle's land. It has sentimental value." "I get that." I paused my drawing tablet. "Okay, thanks, Mark. In fact," he continued, his voice dripping with faux sweetness, "I want to help you take the burden off your shoulders. I have a friend, a developer buddy, who buys distressed properties. He usually flips houses, but he said he might be willing to take that swamp off our hands as a favor to me. He offered $10,000. $10,000. I asked. "But you said it was worthless." "It is," Mark insisted quickly. "But he owes me a favor. Look, 10 grand is a lot of money for you, El. You could buy a new computer. Or, contribute to the household fund." Something about his tone triggered a red flag. Mark never did favors for me unless there was something in it for him. But I played along. "I'll think about it." The next day, Patricia called me. She hadn't called me just to chat in 3 years. Elena, dear, she purred. Mark told me about the offer. You really should take it. I know you're attached, but we have to be realists. You don't want to drag Mark down with legal fees if someone gets hurt on that land, do you? Just sign it over to Mark, so he can handle the sale. He's the businessman, after all. The pressure campaign was on. And when the pressure is on, I get curious. I waited until Mark was in the shower. I knew his passcode. He's not as clever as he thinks he is. It was his birthday. I opened his iPad and went straight to his email. I searched for land, swamp, and property. Nothing. Then I searched the name of the buddy he mentioned. A guy named Greg. I found an email chain, but it wasn't about a favor. It was about a highway expansion. It turned out the state was planning a massive bypass loop to relieve traffic congestion. And right in the middle of the proposed route, my Uncle Joe's useless 40 acres. But the emails weren't just about the state. They were from a commercial real estate firm representing a massive logistics company, a competitor to Mark's own firm. They needed that land for a distribution hub right off the new highway. I scrolled down to the most recent email, dated 2 days ago. It was an offer letter addressed to Mark, even though he didn't own the land. The subject line read, Revised offer. Purchase agreement for parcel 404. I opened the attachment. My breath caught in my throat. They weren't offering $10,000. They were offering $3.5 million. And then I saw Mark's reply. My wife doesn't know the value. She's clueless about these things. I'm getting her to sign the deed over to me this week, for tax purposes. Once the title is in my name, we proceed with the sale at $3.5 million. Just have the paperwork ready. He was going to steal $3.5 million from me. He was going to give me 10 grand, pat me on the head, and stash the rest in an offshore account he'd been researching in his browser history. I put the iPad back exactly where I found it. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard rage. For the next 3 days, I played the part of the doting, confused wife perfectly. I told Mark I was so relieved he was handling it. I told him I trusted his judgment. He set up a celebratory dinner for Friday night. To sign the papers, he said. He invited Patricia, of course. They wanted to witness the victory together. I spent those 3 days very differently. First, I called a real estate firm directly. I told them I was the actual owner and that Mark had no legal standing to negotiate. Once they realized they were dealing with potential fraud, they were very eager to speak to me. I negotiated directly. Because I wasn't just a doodler. I negotiate contracts for a living. I got them up to $3.8 million, with a clause that the sale remained confidential for 48 hours. Second, I visited a divorce attorney. Friday night arrived. The restaurant was dimly lit and smelled of truffle oil and old money. Mark ordered a bottle of champagne before we even looked at the menus. He slid a blue folder across the table toward me. Here it is, babe, he smiled. Simple quitclaim deed. It transfers the property to me. I sell it to Greg for 10 grand, and I write you a check. Easy. Patricia took a sip of her wine. It really is for the best, Elena. You're lucky Mark is willing to do this legwork for you. I opened the folder. I picked up the pen. Mark's eyes were glued to my hand. He was practically salivating. I tapped the pen against the paper. You know, I said, my voice steady. I was looking at the map of the area. It looks like the new highway bypass is going right through the South Acre. Mark froze. The smile didn't leave his face, but it died in his eyes. What? No, that's just a rumor. The bypass is miles away. Are you sure? I asked. Because I did a little research. It seems like Titanium Logistics is very interested in the location. Patricia frowned. Who cares about logistics, Elena? Just sign the damn paper. That's the thing, I said, dropping the pen. I can't sign this. Why not? Mark's voice rose an octave. Elena, don't be difficult. I can't sign it because I don't own the land anymore. Mark looked like he'd been slapped. What did you do? He whispered. I sold it, I said cheerfully. This afternoon. I signed the closing documents at 2 p.m. Mark's face went purple. You sold it to Greg? For 10 grand? Without me? No, I said, leaning in. I sold it to Titanium Logistics. For $3.8 million. The silence at the table was deafening. The couple at the next table stopped eating to look at us. 3. Patricia choked on her wine. 3 million. Mark looked like he was going to vomit. You can't do that. We're married. That's marital assets. Actually, no. I corrected him. Inheritance is separate property in our state. Unless I commingle the funds. Which I haven't. And I won't. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second folder. I slapped it down on top of his quitclaim deed. And this, I said, is why I won't be commingling anything. Mark opened the folder. He saw the petition for dissolution of marriage. He saw the printouts of his emails. He saw the screenshots of his browser history regarding hiding assets in divorce. I know you think I'm just a stupid artist, Mark, I said, standing up. I know you think I'm useless. But this useless artist just made more money in one afternoon than you will make in 20 years. And you get nothing. Elena, wait, Mark stammered, grabbing my wrist. He was sweating now. Baby, let's talk about this. We're rich. We can fix this. I pulled my hand away. I'm rich, Mark. You're unemployed. What? Oh, didn't I mention? I smiled, picking up my purse. Titanium Logistics is a major competitor to your firm. When I met with their VP today, I happened to mention that my husband, who works for their rival, was trying to use inside knowledge to scalp the land and extort them. They were very interested in your business ethics. I imagine your boss is getting a call right about now. I left a $20 bill on the table. For the champagne, I said. Enjoy your dinner with your mother. I walked out of that restaurant and breathed the freshest air of my life. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Mark tried to fight for a piece of the inheritance, but the judge, a stern woman who clearly hated liars, took one look at the attempted fraud emails and laughed him out of court. Because of his attempted double-dealing, Mark was fired from his job and blacklisted in the industry. Last I heard, he moved back in with Patricia. They're currently trying to sell her house because they can't afford the property taxes. Me? I bought a beautiful studio apartment in the city and a small cabin in the mountains. And every time I draw a new character, I give the villains a little piece of Mark, arrogant, greedy, and destined to lose. The reality was unmasked, and for once, the good guy won. What would you have done if you found those emails? Would you have confronted him immediately, or played the long game like Elena? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of sweet justice, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Unmasked Reality for more stories of karma served cold. See you in the next video.